people involved would be passed away because they would be 80, 90, 100 years old.
I get all that. That makes perfect sense. But the thing about, like, well, you don't want to be paying $250, $300 per title search on a dozen properties, you were saying. Let's say it was one you're really interested in, and this is the one. And then you go to the title search company. I need you to do the title. Well, they're never going to be putting insurance on this property. The same situation that I was in, or at least I ended up being in, although it was the opposite. And so they do this cursory search. How do you make sure they actually did their friggin' job?
That you can have them send it to you. You can have them send you the information, but you may have trouble deciphering what's important or what's not. So you want to have a relationship with a law office that you trust, because the searcher's gathering the information. You want the lawyer to look at it, and they're going to determine whether they think that there's an issue. Because sometimes these things are not clear. It's not like there are lots of things that can affect title. It isn't just, something that's obviously recorded. I'll give you an example. House I bought as a primary residence. I was buying it from a woman who was in her 90s. And I think her one sister was still alive when we signed the contract, but passed away shortly thereafter. Come to find out, they had inherited the property in, I think, the 1940s when their parents had passed away. So her and all of her siblings had inherited. But they never transferred, they never took they never took control of the estate and transferred the title into their names.
Right.
So it sat there, still in the parents' name, for decades. Well, what happened was the siblings who inherited the property passed away, one at a time. And some of them died without wills. Some of them died with wills. Some of them died with wills, and in their will it said, my interest in that house passes to my surviving siblings. That was great. But the ones who died without wills, their interest automatically went in order of what the state has for the progression of inheritance, which would be their spouse, their children, whatever. So if they had a spouse, it went to their spouse. If their spouse passed away, it went to their children. If they had two children and one of their children passed away, then part of that interest went to their children. And that happened because it had been so many decades. So by the time this was all searched out, there were so many people with a small fractional interest. It took 11 months to sort out. It took 11 months for me to buy the property. Because
primary,
what?
Primary?
Yeah. Well, that was a primary residence at the time. I don't live there anymore, but yeah. I mean, so yeah, you want someone that you can trust. It was very hairy for them to sort out.
Well, my point is, again, I've had several title searches done at more than one company, and it was $250, $200, $300, whatever.
Yep.
No one ever said preliminary cursory title search. That should be like $5, $10, and then the actual. My point is that they're not selling you two different products, but they actually are.
I don't know if you don't specify
if
you don't specify a 60-year. What did you say that they were doing for you? Like you mentioned something where, like, if you didn't specify a 60-year, they didn't go.
They go just back to the previous owner.
Oh, previous owner.
They won't go back 60 years to the 10 previous owners.
Right.
They just go to the previous owner and stop.
Right. So with something like this,
because they assume that it was taken care of on the other transfer.
Yeah. I mean, if you were buying something that through a normal sale process, and you only looked back to the previous owner who maybe bought it 5 years ago, you're going to probably not going to find anything, but you're probably going to find the most pertinent things, and in a normal sale that at least tells you something. But the fact is that when you're buying at these kinds of sales, it's so messy. So I would just always specifically say I want a 60-year search. I never thought I had to specify until you mentioned it, but I would just make sure I specify. I want a 60-year search. I want to know. Usually what I say is I want to know if the title is marketable, and basically that means is that it's insurable. And insurable means that you have to have a clean 60-year search. So to me, that was the language I was using, but I would probably be more specific now and say I want a 60-year search. It just, you're going to pay for it. But the other thing is it's not just the search. You want to make sure whoever you're dealing with, you trust to look at it. That's why I would develop a relationship with a law office that you trust. Someone who specializes in real estate, not just, Joe Blow who does one kind of real estate but doesn't do that much, one kind of law but doesn't do that much real estate law.
Well, sure. Now, I would also argue if you say, give me a 60-year search, and you pay them for it and they give it to you, then shouldn't they be ready to insure the property if they say everything is good?
Yeah. Yes.
Or it
Yeah.
seems like we're in a gray area all of a sudden.
Well,
again, huh?
yeah. Yes and no. So
the gray area.
yeah, there is a gray area. So this comes up. I don't know about sheriff sales. Sheriff sales probably a little different, but with tax sales, even if the title search is clean, I don't know that you can find a title insurance company that will insure it for like 6 months or probably a year, I think. Because it's such a messy process, the tax sale process. They just even if they don't find anything, it's too much risk for them. They just won't do it. So, plan on owning it for a year, or selling it in cash to somebody who doesn't care.
Waiting for something over 60 years to pop up is the theory.
Well, it doesn't have to be over 60 years. It could just be something that
They
was missed. Sure. Because, like I said, look at the case that I had. And I didn't even tell you one of the important details. So, in my case, where it took 11 months to sort out, we got into about month 9 or so, and the searcher was looking at all these hairy details. They actually found an obituary that mentioned a sibling that nobody had heard of. The woman's in her 90s. She didn't remember she had a brother. She had like 5 or 6 siblings, and she thought she had mentioned all of them. But they looked at this obituary and it said, "Oh, survived by," and they're like, "Well, who's that?" "Oh, yeah, that's my brother." And they're like, "Oh, you had another brother, huh?" So you get so late into this, and those are the kinds of things.
Could you back out at that point or no?
No, I hung in there like a hair in a
No, I
biscuit.
mean, could you have?
Could I have? Yes, because the sales agreement says that they have to provide clear marketable title. We have a closing date, or we have a settlement date, and usually your sales contract will have a little thing that says time is of the essence. Okay. Time is of the essence means that if one side doesn't meet their obligation to meet certain dates, that the other side can say, "Hey, that was important to me. I can back out because you didn't meet this date." So since they didn't have the marketable title for the settlement date, I could have backed out. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Were you losing money during this 11-month process?
No, because I hadn't closed on it, so I didn't have a loan or anything at that point. And actually, since it was going to be my primary residence, what I did was I said, "Well, I don't want to stay where I'm at." I forget if I had already given notice where I was living, because I was renting before I bought this. This was my first primary residence. What I ended up doing was, since the 90-some-year-old woman had already moved out into a home or whatever, and it was mostly her son taking care of it or whatever it was, I ended up renting it from them until they sorted it out.
That's great.
Yeah. I was patient, but like I said, but that like this was personal. This was primary residence, so this was more personal. But like I said, it's
Did you start rehabbing it in those 11 months?
No.
You
Well, I didn't own it at that point, so I didn't know if it was going to actually go through, because it was taking so damn long, and I wasn't going to take and risk it. I wasn't going to put a whole bunch of money into it and all that.
How long ago was that?
I think 2011, I think. And actually, I'm rehabbing that property now, because what happened was once I bought it, I said, "Geez, I have money to rehab it. Or I could take that money and use it to buy an investment." And that's what I did. So instead of rehabbing the house I lived in, I bought my first investment property. So I bought a property off of Craigslist for $7,250. So, and that's just how it all got rolling. So, let's see, anything else on sheriff sales? So I mentioned subject to and loan assumptions. I think that's it. But like I said, with especially with sheriff sales, I think that's the opportunity is that loan. I mean, those loans that they were getting at 3 or 4%, you can't get that today. And if you can find a deal, especially where it's a recent purchase, geez, and if they're going to get foreclosed on, they may not care. If you put $1,000 in their pocket, that's better than getting foreclosed on. Better than sharp poke in the eye with a stick. That you give them some pocket money that they can walk away with. And if you're doing, if you do the subject to, you can also advertise it as they not only avoid the foreclosure, but since you're going to bring the loan current and be paying on it, that those payments reflect on
Their credit.
Not your credit, because the loan stays in their name with subject to. So now your timely payments are building their credit back up again. So if they believe that you're solid and you're going to be paying on time, boy, that's like nothing. All they got to do is live life, and suddenly they got up-to-date mortgage payments, for potentially years and years, making them look.
So you have the deed.
Yep.
But the mortgage does stay in their name,
Sure.
even if they just go somewhere, like they move away or
Yeah.
they don't
Sure.
stay in the house.
Sure. Oh, I
So if you stop paying, does that fuck their credit?
yeah, but it's going to get foreclosed. You're going to lose the
Yeah,
house
yeah,
that you've been putting your money and everything into. You don't want to lose that. That's a good deal. You took it because it's a good deal. Yeah, you don't have to. You can end up with lots of weird situations. I told you I talked to people in all kinds of distress situations. I talked to a girl last week. She lives up, or she owns a house up in like Lake area, like the hideout up in there, and she had a fiance, and she owned the house, but the fiance, who I think is a realtor, wanted to be put on the deed because they're going to get married. He just doesn't want to feel like it's just her house.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, a year or so ago, he got added on the deed. Well, after that, things went south. And now they had some domestic disputes. He got a PFA against her. They have children together. So, PFA against her,
She had to get out.
she had to leave. They're both on the deed. Only she is on the mortgage. So now she has to she still has to pay the mortgage, but she can't live in the house. So he's living in the house, doesn't technically have to pay on the mortgage because it's not in his name. It's not going to screw over his credit. So
we know where this guy's at right now, right? So we can take him as like coolest guy in the world medal.
Well,
whatever, and give it to him,
That's
like,
MacGyver
boy,
right
talk
there.
about
Yeah.
turning the tables.
yeah,
Holy
I mean,
crapper.
I have.
Holy
I think she
crap.
said he was
Change
an
the
agent.
name.
I didn't want to delve into that part of it, but there are things she can do. She can actually. There's a few things she can do. One is she can charge him rent. Technically, because she's prohibited from going to the property, she could take and say, hey, you have full use of the property, I can charge you rent. I read that somewhere. I don't know a lot about that. But more realistically, she can go to court and file to partition. So since
That's wild.
and the partition basically would